Hello and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. As 2018 comes to an end, we will discuss today how this year was for social media. With a reported number of approximately 3.2 billion social media users across the world. With a 13% increase in usership this year, how were all these individuals using social media? And how exactly were they impacted by it? Today, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to the online world. We welcome our esteemed guests to the show. We have with us Jannat Fazal, who is a social activist, and Farhad Jaral, who is a digital strategist. Thank you so much for joining us. Jannat, let's start with you. So how was 2018 as a year for social activism?
We've seen a surge in Me Too movement. It was really good for women. A lot of women came forward with a lot of harassment and sexual harassment especially. And Me Too movement got momentum. So I think women, if I talk about, through a gendered perspective, women got their voice on social media. So I think if I talk about just women, it was good for them. This year has been really good for them.
So the Me Too movement peaked in 2018.
Yeah.
Something that we had not witnessed before.
Yeah, we so in late 2017 and then 2018, a lot of things happened because of which a lot of people and media personals came forward with their harassment stories, and that is where Me Too movement got its momentum from. And we see that it's a trend now that when something is happening, women just go online and they just come forward. They prefer coming forward there, considering the state of our legal, nobody wants to go into the legal system because of how it's prosecuted there and how people do not get a chance they don't get justice and they're not heard, and there's no evidence sometimes. So it's easier to just go online and talk about it.
Jannat, at that same point, did 2018 for social media show that justice is not required in courtrooms, but it could be done through mob voices, mob targeting, because there is a dark side towards this as well?
Yes, I don't think so. Justice can be done through, just being active on social media or just getting momentum on social media or having, testimonies on social media. It's just that it helps you deal with the trauma that you've been facing all along because it provides you with that support. People actually start believing in what you were talking, when you come forward. You get validated, if somebody is there to support you. And it's sort of liberating because if I am coming forward with my problem or my complaint against somebody, a harasser, then it's sort of liberating for me because of the trauma that harassment has had on me. I'm not saying that this is justified, but women have to have voice. And considering our legal system, it takes ages and nothing happens.
Globally too.
Yeah, so nothing happens. And because in our system, testimonies and evidence is required, there is no evidence for sexual harassment, and we've seen it in many cases. So women, you cannot just let go or trivialize their harassment by saying that because there's no evidence, it didn't happen. It happened, but because our legal system does not asserts them. That is why they have to come forward on social media.
Hold on to that thought, Jannat. Let's also take this conversation to Farhad. Farhad, how important was 2018 in realizing and appreciating a mobilization of groups for political causes? We've seen the Yellow Vest protests in France. We've seen many other protests go around. Can you tell us your thoughts about that?
Well, thank you so much, Mishal, for having me here on your show. So, talking about the internet statistics globally, the movements online are taking place. If you talk about the NRA, National Rifle Association, and the gun laws in America. So Trump is facing a huge resistance online, and there are and there are voters who voted Trump are also going against Trump for using the digital media. So America is one example. You talked about France, and there are several examples in the Arab countries as well. Like people are talking about the rights, and people are talking about how internet is changing the political spectrum globally.
What exactly happens for a mobilization to occur over social media? What is the process? Could you take us through it step by step?
Campaigns are designed with, they come up with creative ideas. Like, what the first thing we need is a hashtag for a campaign. Like, there are hashtags which goes viral with the creatives and with the influencers involved. So it's not like so influencers who are politicians, influencers who are in the media, or influencers sitting in the development sector. All are using the hashtags to get the message out and to mobilize the audience who doesn't know about the campaign. So one is having a hashtag. Two is bringing up creative ideas with the graphics. We have seen the videos taking over internet. Like initially it was just the content. People don't have time to read the content now. So what they do is they watch the videos, the textual videos, the videos which have text. So when we are in the offices, we don't have time or we don't have the atmosphere to open up the sound and watch the video. So the textual videos works well in this case. So it's all about designing the campaign and making it more creative and more relevant to the audience which you are targeting. It's proper strategy which people follow to get their message out and to come up with a robust campaign.
Farhad, and also in a time when we see the rise of the right all across the world, does social media offer a more fluid platform of sorts to put out your opinions and discuss them amongst like-minded people?
Well, yeah, right wing is taking over the internet, yes, but there are the other progressive people who are there to report the right wingers. So if there is a content which is having a slightly violent or aggressive tone against someone or some group or some individual, we can report it. So there are right wingers, especially in the western side.
You mentioned a very important point, which is about reporting harassers. And with that point, I'd like to move on to Jannat as well. Jannat, how did we see in 2018 cyber harassment transforming, taking over the internet, or being curbed? Were there any changes, distinctive changes?
So because we've seen rise in social media platforms as well as users of social medias. So that is why harassment in general has risen. We've seen that there's been an increase in cyber harassment, especially for women. And there's a way to report it, but because there was no law and we had our Pakistan Electronic Crimes Act passed in 2016. So after that, it is now a criminal activity if there's any hate speech or somebody is blackmailing or threatening or releasing somebody else's videos. But before that, before 2016, we did not have any such law protecting any citizen of Pakistan. So that is why now the cyber harassment can get reported and is being reported. But before that, there was no such platform. We could not report cyber harassment. Although there's been an increase in cyber harassment because of the increase in internet users and 3G users, but along with that, we've also seen that there's a way and mechanism to report cyber harassment as well. So even if something happens, there's a way for people to report it.
Jannat, with the rise of people using social media, there has also been a rise in how users are using WhatsApp, and it's one of those devices that is a household item of sorts. How in 2018 was WhatsApp a revolutionary term, a revolutionary tool, and how was it damaging, in fact? Because we saw in India there were lynchings because of WhatsApp forward messages. So how was social media playing a role in this regard?
We've seen how this has been playing a role in India. It's, you get a message, it's a forwarded message, it's a fake news, and it instigates sort of hatred towards somebody, which we've seen in India. So in Pakistan, what we've observed in the last 3-4 months at Digital Rights Foundation is that people get, sometimes they get forwarded messages. What happens is in Pakistan, because people here are, I'm not saying that they're not literate, it's just that they're not very, they're not tech savvy that much, and there's a language barrier. So people do not understand when somebody, and they do not verify the messages that they get. And because I'm not saying that they're unable to read, but they just do not have time to read and go through or check the link that, where we're getting this message from. So what they do is they forward their code that they get from WhatsApp, and somebody hacks their WhatsApp. So we've seen massive number of WhatsApp accounts getting banned and hacked this year in late 2018. And because of that, people are unable to recover their accounts. Women, because all their contacts are lost, people get access to their content.
It's a very dangerous way.
It's very dangerous, and it can prove very hazardous if it's not curbed.
Farhad, so social media in the past has played a historic role in movements. The Arab Spring was termed as the Facebook revolution. We are seeing how the yellow vests are protesting, but we are also seeing how it is infringing upon private personal rights, privacy breaches. Do you think after 2018 people have become more aware of the dark side of social media?
Well, we have seen a lot of change on the social media, in the social media trends. People are deactivating their Facebook account due to the data breach and the privacy issues. So yes, people are moving to the more safer platforms on social media like Twitter, because there's no such incident reported on the data breach of Twitter. We have seen the WhatsApp founder leaving the group because of the privacy issues and the data breach. So yes, I believe 2019 will be a year where people will be using digital more responsibly. But again, there is a need of going for advocacy campaigns on this issue.
So much for joining us. Let's move on back to Jannat. Jannat, what can you tell us about the future of how women now after Me Too, but men also, how they're going to move forward using social media? We heard Farhad talk about how people are deactivating their Facebook. Do you think they're going to move away from social media in 2019?
I don't think that they're going to move away from social media, because we do not, when we talk about social media, when we even talk to victims of cyber harassment, of using social media, we do not encourage them moving away from social media, because
why is it important to stay on social media?
Because it's one platform that allows you, it gives you voice, and it gives you that space, that freedom of expression that is one way or the other curbed. Not everybody gets a chance to talk to masses, if not through social media. And B, one has to know the best practices to be there on social media. We need to know what kind of privacy settings we have to have, how do we need to protect ourselves online. What we are putting out there is going to stay there. So I think I totally agree with what Farhad said. We have to have advocacy around these issues. We need to raise these issues, but we also need to understand that this is one platform that we should not leave. And no one should encourage anyone to leave this platform. I don't see, 2019 any different from 2018 in terms of social media. I think users are going to increase. The number of users may increase.
Now we're joined by Hassan Javed, who is a professor of political science at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. Thank you for joining us. Hassan, can you tell us how important in 2018 did we see social media playing a role in the political landscape?
Well, I think 2018 has been a very interesting year for three reasons. The first is this year, with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and related kind of investigations into the use of social media platforms for the manipulation of data for political ends, I think we've begun to see the potentially terrifying extent to which social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and others can be used to pursue partisan political agendas. And the way in which the data harvested from users can be used in a variety of different ways, many of which most users aren't even aware of. The other thing I think is very interesting about about social media in 2018 is the way in which, again, as we've seen repeatedly, the spread of fake news, the spread of disinformation, the spread of propaganda, and often done by governments themselves in an effort to manipulate public opinion, whether we're talking about someone like Donald Trump, who is a very avid user of Twitter and uses it to inflame his base, or whether we talk about other countries like China, for instance, where access to social media is heavily regulated. We've seen the use of these platforms to both spread propaganda and disinformation, and also to persecute and prosecute activists and dissidents around the world. And that's something that we've seen a lot of in Pakistan this year. And the third thing, however, the only kind of positive I can see from all of this is that we've also once again seen that social media can be a powerful tool for activism. I mean, one obvious example that comes to mind is the Me Too movement. But again, I think it's always important to remember that there is often a disconnect between perceptions of how powerful social media can be and the actual extent to which it can change ground realities. And I think what we've seen in 2018 is that when push comes to shove, most states and most authorities will tend to have much more power on the internet and using information technology than many of their opponents and dissidents might have.
So now that, Hassan, that you mentioned how the Cambridge Analytica scandal came out and how it was found out that the Russians were interfering in the elections. Now that governments are aware of what is happening, how social media is being used, what can we foresee in the future in terms of global influences? Will it be restricted? Will governments, as you mentioned, try to take more of a hold on social media?
Well, I think it's very interesting to phrase the question that way, because I think while governments recognize that social media can be a threat, for instance, the instance of Russians hacking or sort of like interfering in American elections, I think the more important thing is to remember that states themselves and governments themselves have tremendous tools, tremendous power at their disposal to manipulate these very same social media tools. So in a sense, I think what's likely to happen in the coming years is that we're going to see an even greater nexus emerging between big tech companies and states and governments. Governments have their own tools for manipulating this kind of data, and they also work often in close collaboration with technology giants to harvest data and to use data for the purposes of spreading propaganda, for targeting dissidents, and so on and so forth. So I think we are likely to see more and more government control being exercised over the internet, both directly and indirectly. Directly in terms of targeting dissidents, limiting access, surveillance, and so on and so forth, but indirectly in terms of using those same platforms to manipulate public opinion. I think that's the direction in which we can see this going. We've already seen this happen. We see it happen in China, we're seeing it happen in Pakistan, we're seeing it happen throughout the developing world, and even in the developed world, let's not forget that the most sophisticated means of surveillance, of intercepting data, of monitoring what people are doing are in the West. They're in places like the United States. And on the one hand, while they complain about Russian interference in elections, at the same time, they've been intercepting and monitoring the communications of people around the world for almost a decade now, using increasingly sophisticated tools and algorithms. So I think it's quite clear that the coming years will see a greater attempt, and quite possibly a successful attempt, by states and governments to control social media and to manipulate it for the pursuit of their own objectives.
Hassan, you mentioned here surveillance, and of course a large part of it is also corporate surveillance. And in 2018, yep, a lot of the debate was surrounded about Facebook's algorithms, the marketing tools. What can we see? What were some of the distinctive trends in 2018 which made the public realize how dangerous algorithms can in fact be?
Well, I think there's still a general lack of perception about just how great a role algorithms are increasingly playing in our lives. Despite the tremendous publicity that surrounded the Cambridge Analytica leaks, for instance, I would imagine that even many of those who followed that story and are interested in those developments probably see it through a kind of purely political lens in terms of how their data is harvested for targeted political campaigns. What many people don't realize is that almost every technological tool they use these days, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's an app that tracks their fitness, all of these are governed by algorithms that are essentially tailored to provide them with what they want. They're harvesting data on one hand, but on the other hand, they're providing them with information that, in a sense, confirms their biases. So when you log into Facebook, for instance, your timeline isn't showing you a kind of neutral overview of everything that's happening with your friends or in the world. The ads you see, the content you see is deliberately designed to appeal to you based on predictive algorithms that ascertain what your political opinions are, what your tastes in food are, what your tastes in culture are, and so on and so forth. So the reason why tech companies do this is obvious. Is by confirming consumers' biases, by providing them with things that arguably they want to see, they're maximizing their revenue. They're ensuring people remain engaged with those platforms. The danger, of course, with a tool like Facebook and similar social media tools is that what ends up happening is that by providing people with the same type of content again and again and again, you end up creating echo chambers. You end up creating these silos on the internet within
Hassan,
which
that's a very
little
interesting point you mentioned, echo chambers, and I'd like to get to that later. But right now we're joined with Adam Smith, who's a contributing editor at PC Magazine, London. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam. Adam, so Facebook and Twitter stock shares dropped to quite a low in 2018. How do we expect this trend to continue, or will it continue? Or will Facebook and Twitter take a hold of the problems that are causing a fall in stock shares?
I think we can see it as a trend that will continue into 2019. Right now, Facebook and Twitter are both in quite low regards due to things that the professor has just been talking about, the Cambridge Analytica scandal and, questioning by the US Congress. Whether or not the companies can actually take a hold on it is a different matter. It's going to take a lot of work for them to redeem their reputation. Most recently with files that have been shown that allowed other companies access to Facebook's messaging platform that people didn't know companies could do. I think what it comes down to is Facebook needs to really inform the public about what it does or does not have access to before it can start regaining that trust. I don't see that happening, certainly in the early parts of 2019, maybe as the years go on, but I see it definitely as a trend that will continue.
Adam, on that similar point, in September, we saw the greatest security breach done by Facebook, in which almost 50 million users, their privacy was breached, and Facebook apologized for it previously in the Congress as well. We are talking about how Facebook is moving towards a place where they're realizing they went wrong, but is there a very visible and evident trust deficit developing amongst the public with these forums?
There is definitely a trust deficit. I think people are much more aware how quickly news can be spread on Facebook and on social media in general, and I think people are conscious that news might not be accurate. And if Facebook and in the eyes of the public, Facebook is the one helping to propagate that. Now, until Facebook, takes the reins and challenges that, that's something that's not going to change.
So a lot of people perceived technology to have great, immense potential, and it does indeed. And this concept of technological utopianism, do you think people are now realizing that doesn't exist?
I think to some extent, yes, but I think also that we could take very clear steps to make sure that it does exist. So Facebook, for example, has almost ubiquity as a service now. It seems that everyone is on Facebook. Now, once you have that level of control and permeation, it should be easy for them to be clear about what it is, what the platform can or cannot do, and re-inspire trust within the public, and going down that route is the sort of utopianism that people are really looking for. A recent study in America showed that it would take people $1,000 to not go on Facebook for a year. And that's because of the communities and the friends that they can make across the world on the platforms. The utopianism is still there, but people are much more critical about it over the past year. And there are steps that can be taken to make it happen.
Hassan Javed, I'd like to ask you, do you think 2018 was a year of cultural reckoning with social media platforms?
I think, as Adam was just saying, there certainly is a sense that people are asking more questions about social media platforms and the role that they're playing in society. But I think the trouble is also a point he identified, which is that they are ubiquitous. And for many, many people, increasingly large numbers of people, they're indispensable. And again, I mean, unless there's a fundamental change in the business model of these technology giants, unless there's a serious push for more regulatory reform to make them more accountable in terms of how they harvest and use data, unless there's more transparency in their operations, I would imagine things will, remain business as usual. So more questions may be being asked, but at the same time, I mean, fundamentally, the way the industry operates hasn't really changed in a meaningful way. And another important point to remember is that while Mark Zuckerberg might testify before Congress, when it comes to other parts of the world, for instance, where serious questions can and should be asked about how data here is used, how these firms operate with our governments. There's even less accountability and transparency, and even less of a push for that kind of reckoning. So yes, more and more questions are being asked about them, but at the same time, as of now, I haven't really seen anything that would suggest a fundamental shift in terms of how these social media companies operate and in terms of how they're held to account by different governments.
Thank you so much. That was Hassan Javed joining us. We're going to continue this conversation with our esteemed guests, but let's take a short break first. Welcome back to Indus Special. Now, after all the scandals Facebook faced as a service in 2018, they realized that they wanted to go back to what they exactly were, which was being a social media platform and nothing more. Let's watch a little video that Facebook put out.
We came here for the friends, and we got to know the friends of our friends. Then our old friends from middle school, our mom, our ex, and our boss joined forces to wish us happy birthday. Then we discovered our uncle used to play in a band and realized he was young once too. And then we found others just like us. And just like that, we felt a little less alone. But then something happened. We had to deal with spam, clickbait, fake news, and data misuse. That's going to change. From now on, Facebook will do more to keep you safe and protect your privacy, so we can all get back to what made Facebook good in the first place. Friends. Because when this place does what it was built for, then we all get a little closer.
So that was a little video showing what Facebook wants to do, get back to what makes Facebook great. Adam, what do you think about that? Do you think that social media platforms, after all these scandals, now want to revert back to how they originally were? And do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's a definite possibility because Facebook controls how its algorithm ranks its content. And I think it's easy to get back to seeing more of what your friends post than it is, say, more news articles or more video or something like that. What I think the problem is, it's a critical misunderstanding of where the problem comes from. Now, the issue of, say, clickbait or fake news, as Facebook mentioned in the video, it implies that that comes from the publishers themselves. When in fact it comes from people on your friends list sharing stories. It comes from maybe your Facebook friend that isn't particularly savvy when it comes to the news, sharing something from a not particularly well-known news site. It comes from it being shared by your friends and family rather than from the site itself. And my worry is that Facebook saying, well, we're going to make your friends more visible in your feed, doesn't address the problem that if your friends are sharing fake information, if your friends are still pushing across spam, and if that's just what that content your friends are sharing, then making that more prominent isn't going to fix the issue.
Then, Adam, doesn't that beg the question that Facebook never really was this site that they're romanticizing it was in the past, because then too friends were free to share whatever they wanted to?
Yes and no. I think Facebook did have this ideal of wanting to be a place where friends went and spoke and shared information when it was a lot smaller. But Facebook has grown so rapidly and become so powerful so quickly that it doesn't really know I still don't think it really knows how to deal with just having this amount of power. Mark Zuckerberg, when he gives his answers to Congress, to other people in power, doesn't really understand that he has so many users under him on his platform, the size of quite a large country at this point. I don't think he knows how to deal with that. Whether or not Facebook could ever go back to that now, at such the mass that it has, is almost a silly question. Facebook shouldn't be looking to go back to something. Facebook should be looking at the future and saying, these are the problems. It's going to take human fact checkers to look at these things. Maybe we need to take a bit more responsibility about what is on our platform, rather than deferring the responsibility to your friends list and saying, well, it's what they're sharing. We can't control that. Because they can.
Jannat, we've been talking a lot about Facebook here, but of course another very prominent social media platform is Twitter. And Twitter stocks also dropped after they claimed that they were going to try to delete 1 million fake accounts. So where do you see that going in 2019, control over Twitter?
They did say that they're going to delete all those accounts, but I don't think so they ever did that. And considering the kind of companies, the social media platforms, the bigger how big these social media platforms are, I don't think that they're going to do anything that is going to affect their stocks or their market. So I think that they're going to change their policies, and they will try to limit all all of that, but I don't think that they're going to delete those accounts, or they're going to do
But why do you think they won't delete those accounts?
Because they haven't done it yet. I mean, when they said it, they should have done it by now.
Prompt action didn't take place.
They didn't. It didn't. There has to be a prompt action, but it didn't happen. So there's a possibility that they delete it later on, but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know. I mean, 2019 will tell us where this is going to go, but I don't see it happening.
Adam, do you see the business models of these social media platforms changing in any way in 2019?
I don't see the business model changing in any way. It's still going to be based on advertising, and that's still going to be based on getting as many people as they can, viewing the content on the social media platforms in any way possible. And much to the point of saying before of they haven't deleted the accounts now, why would they do later? The more controversial content you can get on Twitter, the more people are going to go to Twitter. And deleting those accounts, if in theory it would stop the controversy, that's going to affect Twitter's profit margin. It's a delicate balance of being seen as an acceptable social platform while still developing that sort of water cooler debate that makes Twitter such a valuable service.
And Adam, also on the case of Facebook, it has a monopoly of sorts of social media platforms. It owns WhatsApp, it owns Instagram. So how exactly do you think that is going to change in the future, or will it even so? Will Facebook continue to expand? You talked about how Mark Zuckerberg now doesn't know how to control the small country he has. Do you think there's going to be a change in that?
I think the biggest change we're going to see is more people being aware that WhatsApp and Instagram are Facebook products. With the founders of both companies leaving this year, and it essentially becoming a much more Facebook product, people are going to be much more aware of advertising coming up in Instagram, perhaps advertising coming up in WhatsApp, and people, I think, more of the public are going to be aware that so much of their lives, so much of the way that they communicate with their friends is owned by this mass conglomerate. And I can genuinely see people taking something of a stand against that, whether it's just using the platforms a little bit less or actively deleting them. Facebook went through a mass hashtag delete Facebook movement this year. I could see that expanding to Instagram and WhatsApp if trends like these continue into 2019, and I do believe that they will.
Isn't it ironic, though, that you need social media to delete social media?
I think it is, yeah. The need for connection is a strong one, and having it all interconnected is essentially means it's a challenge to just wean yourself off anything. It's a tough place for anyone to be this year,
But social media, we've been talking a lot about how it has been responsible for privacy breaches and all that stuff. And you mentioned how there is a need to socialize, Adam. Also in 2019, people are becoming more aware of how it can create social isolation of sorts, social media. So do you think people are themselves becoming more aware of how social media can harm their well-being?
I think so, yes. But I think that's less from the social media companies, though, and more from the devices that we're using. The biggest trend in terms of the iPhone and Android devices this year has been well-being, has been tracking how much they use, how much you use your devices, and automatically turning off access to those apps once you reach a certain limit. Now, these features have come out quite recently. We don't have quite enough data at the moment to see how those are being used. We don't know whether that's going to be effective or whether people are just going to ignore the warnings. But people are much more conscious about it. I suppose the difference is whether anyone does anything about it. We can have all the information that we want, but if people are just going to ignore it because the platforms are so good at sucking you back in, are so good at giving you that little endorphin high when you see a like or you see a new tweet, that's the battle. It's the battle between essentially the hardware and the software. And 2019, we will see who wins.
And Adam, also, we saw many challenges, some that were frivolous, some that were funny. For example, the Kiki challenge that took over Facebook and Twitter. Now, these challenges, in an odd sort of way, bring back that essence of what social media is supposed to be, which is social. Can you tell us more about how important these trends are to the users of Facebook and social media?
I think these trends are important in terms of getting information out there. I think it's important for people to know exactly what Facebook can or can't do, exactly what data Facebook and Twitter does or doesn't have on you. But as you say, there is the irony to it that you need to have this social media movement in order to delete social media, almost conspiring to affect itself. And I almost think that's what stops such movements having effectiveness, because no matter how big it gets, no matter what action you take, people are in the back of their minds going to be thinking, well, what happens next? And how am I going to learn about it if I'm not on the platforms where it's happening? It's almost paradoxical in its way.
Adam, I'm curious to know, in 2018, what was your personal takeaway from social media? What did you learn?
I think I learned that not enough people know what they're signing up for when it comes to social media, and that it is almost at the current stage impossible to inform them. When people hit agree on those terms and conditions articles, it's impossible to read. It is written in legal jargon. People don't know what they're giving away. I think the biggest thing that tech companies could do, both on their platforms, is to try and inform people what it is the tech companies are gathering on them and why they're seeing what they're seeing on their platforms. I think that level of transparency is possibly the best thing that these companies can do to ensure that people still want to use them, essentially.
Jannat, I'd also like to ask you the same question. What was your key takeaway from 2018 and social media?
My key takeaway was that once you put something out there, it's going to stay there. So one has to be cognizant of what they're putting out there. Anything that goes online is going to stay there. So just be mindful of what you're putting out there, so that it doesn't come back to haunt you in any way, or it doesn't get you don't get threatened or blackmailed because of it in any way. So just be mindful of what you're doing out there, and because people have access to it, they can see it, they can misuse it as well. So do not give them that, don't give them ammunition against you.
Jannat, we earlier talked about how social media also allows empowerment. So do you think that the benefits of it have outweighed the the cons of it in 2018?
I think so, yes. Because how this social media has given voice to women, this wouldn't have happened had it not been here. So I think, yes, like any other thing, everything has pros and cons, and social media has them too, but we need to understand and we need to build on the pros and minimize the cons for ourselves as well. Because when we say that social media platforms, the companies, the administration, they have to be more they need to tell the users what they're signing up for. We as consumers need to be aware, and we need to be mindful, and we need to take responsibility ourselves as well. We just cannot put responsibility on them. So we have to take responsibility for what we are signing up and what we're going to do and what we're going to use it for. So I think the responsibility lies at both ends.
And Adam, in 2019, do we see people becoming more aware of this, and the trust deficit that was caused, it's going to be regained? This is the last question, and then we'll end the show.
I don't know whether the trust deficit is going to be regained, but I know that many people are going to be more conscious for it and for calling for it, essentially. It's whether or not these companies can take the hit to their reputation, and in some cases take the hit to their stock and their profit margins in order to keep themselves so regarded as such in 2019.
Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us. Thank you so much, Jannat, for joining us. It was a great debate and a discussion. We hope to see you again at Indus Special tomorrow.